Hello, this is Pastor Terry Goodman, and I want to welcome you to the Wesleyan Connection. This podcast is primarily for the clergy and laity of the Holston Annual Conference. Join with me now as I take a look around the Connection and share some of the things happening in the churches of our annual conference. In December, our district discipleship team met. Actually, it's called the district leadership team here in Big Stone Gap. And we had another one of those, what may seem like free-flowing kinds of discussions, but I think that's sort of what the team is there for, to discuss some ideas and to try to hash out what it means to be in ministry and what it means to lead the churches of our district. And at this particular meeting, we raised the question initially of how do you start new things, and that quickly devolved into sort of the opposite. How do you stop things that are already going, that have gone on forever and ever and ever and ever? And so it's a pretty interesting discussion. We work our way through that, and several examples come up, and we come down to a conclusion of trying to sort of determine what the outcome is that we're looking for from the various things that we do, and maybe use that as a way to judge effectiveness. I don't know. You listen to it yourself and see what you think might be the best way to not only start a new program, but how do you stop something that's already been going on for ages and ages.
Trying stuff is wonderful. It's not holding on to it when it doesn't work. And so y'all are talking about how do you start new stuff. I'm still working on how do you stop dead stuff.
Yeah.
And they've been doing it for 400 years. Never worked the first time, but they're still doing it.
I'm pretty sure Jesus did it that
way. Well, and that raises a good question, because a lot of our churches do things just because we've always done them.
And they're bogged down in it.
Yeah.
They don't have time or energy to start something new because they're still doing the things that don't work.
Mm-hmm. I've been reading a number of books that's been talking about this, about simplifying. Mm-hmm. Part of it's personal, but part of it's been ministry. And, this is one of those things, they start out, the ones that I've read, all of them start out, you got to have your mission statement or vision so that you know what you keep and what you get rid of.
But
you talk with the church.
It's hard to get rid of the golden calf.
Yeah. And you try and say, this is not working.
Don't matter.
Or even worse, you say it's hindering other areas, because this is taking up, for me, it's taking up pastoral time, and they're like, well, this is what we want. And I'm like, it may be what you want, but, you can't have these two wants, because either one of them you put your energy into, or the other one you put your energy into, but you cannot have both at the same time.
But the truth is, I really believe most churches want to hold on to those things that they've been doing, even though they don't work, more than they want new people or any of the stuff they talk about that they want. They really don't want, because they won't try it for it. They just want to hold on to the old.
I think in some ways what it boils down to, I think there's comfort in what you know. But what I have seen is that the people who basically bring it to me saying, we want to keep this, aren't even the ones that's involved. Mm-hmm. They don't even participate in the program. But I've raised questions about it, and they're like, well, if we do this, we'll upset people. I'm like, we can do things in a different way where we don't upset them. But
or we can let go of things and honor them. That once they did work, or once they were important, and celebrate them. And it's sort of like, I loved my dad. I don't want to keep his body around because it'd be stinky. But but we honored him. We celebrated his life. We can, I continue to remember him, but it's time to let that piece go.
I think that it really, you was talking about starting programs. I think that really it all kind of comes back to, I think it does come back to a vision, of where you're wanting to go. Because if you start a new program and that program gets rolling, but you've never really established how it fits into the church's vision, basically you're going to end up with maybe something you're going to have to kill down the road, in which you've got other people that are caught up in it, that's now entitled to it.
And I think that's one of the reasons it's hard to start something new in churches, because other people know you start something, there's just going to be something else to hold on to.
Yep.
But I kind of met that full in the face Saturday night. Our church has been really struggling about contemporary music, and they keep wanting to go back to the old way of just singing hymns, and I'm either way. And then I went to a meeting Saturday night for the youth in Lee County at Lee Theater. And I got to thinking, now, Lane, 40 years ago, almost, 1978, 79, you were in California, and you brought back this contemporary music back to Lee County, and they were calling you a tool of the devil, and there was Dallas Holmes, and I'll Rise Again, and Don Francisco, and those were before your all's time. But it was contemporary music out in California, and I just loved it. And when I got out of the Marine Corps, I tried to bring it back here, and people were resisting it and calling me all these things. And now, it's accepted in most of the churches, and so we were at this contemporary worship service, and I was never so bored in all my life. We stood for 15 or 20 minutes singing a few praise songs, same lines almost over and over and over. And I just thought, why can't we just sing Hark the Herald Angels Sing? That is so pregnant with meaning and stuff. And I realized I don't like the stuff that I try to bring back here. It's morphed into something that I don't recognize nor really care for. I realize how much I love the hymns. So sometimes you got to have a good reason for leaving the old, because I would have been one of those who would have tried to get everybody to leave the hymns and go to the contemporary. But now that I got a full dose of it the other night, and I thought, I don't like this. I was bored out of my skull. We were just standing there for like 20 minutes, just singing the same lines over and over and over. After a while, your mind just quits engaging, and I'm not putting it down. I'm just saying, I thought it used to be for me, but it's not, and I'm really more strong for hymns than I've ever been.
I like some of the contemporary, but the 7-11, that just doesn't make it.
Oh, no,
7-11.
Yeah, 7 words, 11 times.
Oh, I like that. I got to remember to put that down.
Well,
That's what kills me. But I too prefer the old hymns. But I'm old.
But I didn't realize how much I really did. I thought I was really for this contemporary
I
stuff.
like
I'm not as
blended,
much for it as
I like blended music. But I also have enough sense to realize that it's not just about me. And so I try to keep my mouth shut when somebody else wants the other predominantly. But
well, I'm just saying, I thought the church was being too old-fashioned and not wanting change when they wanted to just stay with the hymns. But now I'm on board with them more than ever, because I realize they've been to their children's churches in, Knoxville, Kingsport, Johnson City, and they go to the more contemporary service, and they're thinking, this is just not us, and they bring that thought back, and so
well, one of the keys is whatever style we do, we got to do it well. And that, if we do hymns, make sure we do it well. If we do contemporary, make sure we do it well. That's the bad. That's the bad thing is too often we find we don't do it well. And as I've always heard, Sunday's the one time we've got the greatest chance to reach our audience. So whatever we do, we got to make sure we do it well. Yeah, not just the hymns, but the whole worship service has to be done well. And sometimes it's hard to do that because we get so busy with other things.
I think that actually comes back. You tying it in right there with busy with other things. I think that really is where we got. I look at my fall, and it just seems like I'm just going from one thing to the next to the next.
Absolutely.
Where do I have time to really stop and go? What can we do to make this worship service the best that we can do? It's just now been really the middle of November that I finally went, and at that particular point, I get to wind down and then wind right back up into Christmas, So, how do you have that kind of time to really sit down and say, we need to think about how we do church, what we really need to do versus what we're doing that really we don't need to be doing.
Well, and I think I was in a training session a few weeks ago for all the extended cabinets across the United States. We had to go to Jacksonville. And one of the things they kept stressing was we've got to understand why we do things. The why. And I think maybe that needs to be our question in January. Why? Why are we a church? Why do we do things? And one of the things they suggested, and I've heard this before, is we got to look at what are the outcomes. What are the outcomes we want? And so if you know what the outcomes are, you sort of work backwards, and the why becomes apparent. But too often, like you say, what we're doing in our churches is we're doing the same things we've always done. Why? Because we've always done them. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I've heard said before is that maybe some of the way we get rid of some of this is we give people permission to do it on their own, but we don't have to do it. But that raises the question: people get mad if the pastor's not participating. Mm-hmm. So how do we?
Started that.
Huh?
I've already started that. It's just like, I don't have time to fool with all these. If that's not something I'm interested in, I don't see results from it. If you want it, do it. Maybe you'll do a better job with pastor out of it.
Yeah. What was the response?
So far, it's been decent.
Good.
I haven't had a lot of complaints because I wasn't there, but the results are still the same thing.
Yeah.
Using time and effort of the church
But see,
to do something that's doing nothing.
But see, that's the thing. I mean, it's not just us. My mind has been going with this for a while. I mean, you think about our time. If we're preaching on Sunday, preaching at night, doing a Wednesday Bible study, and then maybe teaching a Sunday school class, we've got 20, 30 hours just worth of study right there. That means that if you did, there's no such thing as a 40-hour work week for a pastor, but if it was, and you only got 10 hours worth for anything else. Mm-hmm. For us, you go back to a church member, what do we expect out of a church member? We expect Sunday morning. We don't even really get that anymore. We expect, hopefully, some type of small group. We definitely don't get that much. Hopefully some service out of them. So 3 hours a week if we're being lucky, and we want to waste it with other activities. Sometimes I'm just sitting there thinking, we've got things so caught up with so many activities that the church people, those who we're basically losing now, are going, I'm tired. Right. I just don't. I don't want to do
they've got
anything.
activities outside the church too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm an older congregation I have, and they're some of the most active people in this town in terms of the things they do in the community, and then finding time for them to do something at church as well. That stretches them. Shall
And
we
it's
say.
not just what they're doing in the community. The grandparents are almost all involved in the grandchildren now. I mean, they've got to go to every ball game, and every kid, it seems like, in schools playing 15 different sports. They're in 14 different public service type things, and the grandparents are right there with all of them. And the grandparents are wore out.
Well,
And one of the reasons that's happening is because grandparents are raising the kids.
Well, even the ones aren't raising the kids.
Yeah.
They still got to be at. I've got one that has to go to Florida at least 7 or 8 times a year now just to watch her grandchild do this, that, or something else.
Yeah.
They're wore out. And yet they'll still hang on to those old things, that they've got to do because great-great-granddaddy started that and, got to keep his honor going. That's the one thing that just kills me about the church is they won't give up on the golden calf.
I think it comes back to what Jeff was saying. What is really the outcome that we're looking for? Mm-hmm. What is the outcome? I mean, if we're talking discipleship, what does discipleship look like?
Mm-hmm.
Are we talking expanded ministry, participation? Are we talking spiritual fruit? I heard a term that has resonated with me, and maybe my next catchphrase, but capacity for effective ministry. Either you're increasing that capacity or you are diminishing that capacity. And, I'm thoroughly convinced that the more we do, the less that capacity is. We diminish that capacity. And, if we would say, here's what we do. We do 1, 2, 3. And beyond that, we shuffle it off into a small group and let that be.
Yeah.
But
This is Pastor Goodman. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Wesleyan Connection. Be sure to check back often for more podcasts.